All right, we are going to do something a little bit different this time. We're going to have the adult sermon as well. You may have thought, oh, that's over awfully quickly. Sorry. Where is Father Ron? We want Father Ron. So, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. You can exhale. Breathe a collective sigh of relief. I'm not going to read the entire Bible to you, at least not today. We wouldn't beat the Baptists to Luby's. Now, I do have to admit that it makes me just a little bit nervous every time I hear "in the beginning." I find myself thinking, oh heavens, what in the world have I done now that I need to be taken back to the beginning, back to where it all started, to try to regain some clarity, to go out behind the proverbial spiritual woodshed. But there's something that's important that happens in the very first chapter of the Bible, in those mere 31 verses, that sets the tone, that defines the relationship for the rest of the story. And so I don't know if it's not important enough that maybe I need to go back there and read those 31 verses every Sunday, or maybe every day. Because encapsulated in those 31 verses is a fundamental tenet that I give constant voice to believing. And yet, so often, my actions, the actions that come from deep inside me, seem to push against. In those 31 verses, God does all of the creating. All of the creating. Humans do not come onto the scene until the sixth day. I did not create one single thing. Nothing. Interestingly enough, whether we are evolutionists or creationists, we can all agree on this one fundamental tenet. We did not create any of this. Whether we showed up in 6 days or 6 billion years, we didn't create this. God put us in charge of this, stewards, as it were. If we're sitting here today, it's most likely because we think God or some force outside of ourselves, whatever you call that force, did the creative work. And so, God is God, and I am not. God is God, and I am not. Creator, creation. This may seem like an overly simple concept, and yet I believe it is one of the most difficult tenets of our Judeo-Christian heritage to truly embody and live out. I don't know if incarnation and resurrection and ascension aren't actually easier concepts. Seriously, God being born in a manger is actually easier to fathom than God is God and I am not. Because we live in a world that screams at us day and night that we are God, that we are the masters of our own fates, that we control our own destinies. If you don't like your life, you have only yourself to thank for it. Maybe that is why we need to keep going back to the beginning and hearing it over and over and over again. God is creator, and I am creation. Abundance is from God, not from me. It's pretty clear how the landowner in today's gospel account views himself in relation to the world around him. Now, I will give you this. He has made some great decisions that have paid off big for him. His 401k is fat, and he is set. It's clear who he believes is responsible for his good fortune: him. And I am not here to dispute that. I wouldn't begin to tell you that you shouldn't be thinking about your 401ks and long-term care insurance, planning for retirement and the future. Definitely, all of that stuff must be done. That's not what this guy's problem is. He's flipped the script, so to speak. He's got it twisted up. Listen to what he says. What should I do? I have no place to store my crops. I will pull down my barns. I will store my grain and my goods. I will say to my soul, I have ample goods laid up. I. Do you hear any acknowledgement in any of that the abundance that he enjoys comes from somewhere, anywhere outside of himself? No, I don't. I am God. I am creator. I made all of this. Now, maybe he did make the good decision to plant crops at the right time. I'll give him that. Where'd the seeds come from that he planted? Where'd the dirt come from that he planted those seeds in? Or the rain that watered those seeds? Or all of the other hands that harvested those crops? Where is his gratitude for that which is not him that made all of that possible? Where is the acknowledgement that he is a steward of creation, not the creator? God is God, and I am not. Now, there is a popular little theory going around in our culture today. It's called a bootstrap mentality. And it goes a little something like this, and this is my own personal story. Now, I grew up in what I would consider to be the lower side of middle class. We didn't have much, but my parents managed to give me a basic education. Thanks to good circumstance, maybe you'd call it luck, maybe you'd call it God's favor, I was able to go on to complete 2 advanced degrees while working full-time jobs, finishing both without student debt, thereby securing better paying positions. You might say that I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. If I could do it, well, why can't everybody? Don't we all start on the same level playing field? While I will admit it did take hard work and perseverance on my part, it would not have been possible to have achieved those degrees debt-free had I not had a very generous grandmother who left me a small sum of money to fund those studies. That abundance was not something that I or even she created. It was God's abundance that she stewarded for a short time and then passed on to me to steward for a short time that made those things possible. I didn't create it. Now, this may seem like semantics, like we're splitting hairs, but it's important to discern the difference between being the creator versus being the steward of what God has created. And here's why. When we put ourselves into the role of creator, then abundance creation immediately becomes finite. It's a pie to be divided up, with the spoils going to the strongest and the smartest, a contest to be won. We move into a scarcity mentality. There simply isn't enough to go around for everyone. However, if we are the stewards of God's creation, the creation that came into being before we ever stepped foot onto the planet, then abundance creation is infinite because God created, creates, and continues to create well into the future. If we work from the position of steward rather than creator, then generosity and abundance rule the day because we shift our focus from self to other, to outside of ourselves. Gratitude to God reflected by generosity to and with our neighbors means that suddenly there is enough for everyone. There is enough to go around. Jesus is not saying, do not be good stewards. Far from it. Be good stewards, yes. Be faithful in what you've been given. But beware of thinking that you created it, because you didn't. Do not let it become your I am statement. I am my 401k. You are not your 401k. You are a beautiful child of the Most High God who lives in the gratitude of God's abundance. You steward it for a time, and then that time is over, and someone else stewards it until they pass it on. Abundance takes on a completely different meaning because there is enough. It's not a pie to be stored up and hoarded. It's all God's creation, and we steward it for God. Now, if this were October, you'd have a pretty good idea how the rest of this stewardship sermon might go. You might, by this point, feel my hand going into your pocket. And so, let me just say on behalf of our treasurer, who's sitting right here, that if you could possibly bring your pledge up to date, golly, we'd sure be grateful. However, that's not the abundance that I'm needing us to access today. Over the past couple of weeks, we've experienced a lot of individual and collective grief within this congregation. I'm going to just name it here for myself and maybe for you and for all of us. We've lost our rector and our youth minister. We've had 3 funerals in the last 2 weeks. There's a lot of grief to deal with. We need to be with that in healthy, responsible ways. And I and you and we need to be able to go to God's well of abundance, fully aware of what our position is as we stand at that well. We are not the creators. we don't have to fix everything. Sometimes it's good enough to just go and be. We don't create. God does that. Our job is to steward as faithfully as we know how. And there is a huge exhale of relief in that knowledge, because the finite becomes infinite. The well of God's love overflows, and there's enough to cover and support all of us and all of this. We are going to need to sit at someone's bedside or in some committee meeting or in goodness knows what kind of setting, knowing that God's abundant mercy and grace will undergird all that we will do in the weeks and the months ahead. God is God, and I am not. Creator, creation. And God saw that it was very, very good. Amen.